Hi everyone. So first slide, was that kind of obvious to everyone? They've seen it enough now? Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully people have seen that.
Okay. We'll move on then. Hello everyone, my name's Sara Gowen. I'm the Chief Exec at Sheffield Young Carers, a local charity that does exactly what its name says, which is about supporting the young carers in our city. And it's great to be invited to be part of the QI event, because we've been doing quite a lot of work recently with the trust, where we've been working around the engagement with young carers in terms of looking at the situation about how we can improve the identification and support of them within the trust. And it's been some really good work. So it felt like a really good opportunity to talk about how that engagement has worked, and celebrate some of what I think is leading to sort of like an improvement in certainly for our young carers in terms of that identification and support. So it's really great to be here, to be able to sort of to talk about that work and talk about something that's kind of going well, because conscious that within the context of everything else that's happening, worldwide, as well as kind of within the trust, it's really good to look at some of the things that are kind of working well, and then look at some of those potential next steps that we can do to carry on that improvement work. So initially I'm just going to talk over some of the kind of issues about the impact on young carers around the kind of services that the trust provides. I'm not giving a lot of detail here about what it is who is a young carer, and the impact of being a young carer more generally, and the sort of stuff they do, because I'm hoping that some of that information's already available. But at the end there is a slide with the details linking to our website and everything, which will show you a little bit more detail if you want any of that, and my email, so any additional information that you want, I'm happy to pass that on. But I wanted to really focus on some of the engagement work we've done as part of this presentation. But just look initially at these are some of the kind of findings around the impact on young carers on their mental health from their caring responsibilities. And it says here about how many feel more stressed, feel more tired. 45% of young adult carers have mental health problems. So these are some of the young people that could potentially become moving into the kind of adult mental health services, because of the impact of in particular the impact of the emotional care that they provide. And that's a really important thing to recognise around young people, is it's not just the physical care they provide, the emotional care, and that emotional care is what has a really big impact, particularly where they're supporting young people, supporting family members where there's mental ill health. We've really noticed that the impact on the young carers' mental health in that circumstance is much higher than other young carers that might be supporting around physical disabilities, particularly kind of around mental health. So these are just some of the kind of stats about the impact. So it's kind of one of the things that we kind of been working on with the trust, is thinking around how you can ask that question of the adults that you're working with, the service users that you're working with. How can we ask that question about caring responsibilities? How can we start identifying when there's dependent children, with children in the family? How can we start asking that question around whether they're taking on caring responsibilities? Young people affected by familial substance misuse. We have the council contract plus some of the funding around supporting young carers, but also we work with young people affected by familial substance misuse. A lot of these are young carers, but not necessarily all of them. Some might no longer be living with the person that misuses the substances. But these are just some sort of stats around the impact of children, which you'll be well aware of through your substance misuse services. And again, it's asking those same questions within those services when you're looking at an adult and they've got children in the family, is how many of those are kind of taking on caring responsibilities. We can look at how they're impacted, and that's the kind of work we do with them, but some of those will be taking on caring responsibilities as well. And part of the message we bring out when we're talking about that identification of young carers is that they are a critical part of the recovery of the person that they care for, same as an adult carer is. So that's just some stats around that. Inevitably, there's a lot of stuff happening in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic is having an impact on us around our mental health and around a range of other factors in our lives. Young carers in particular, they are taking on more caring responsibilities under the pandemic, particularly under lockdown, when they didn't even have the break of school. So they were literally caring 24/7. So these are just some of the carers trusted, some a survey of young carers kind of that 40% of young carers and 59% of young adult carers say their mental health is worse. We've certainly seen that with the young carers we support within Sheffield, and we've raised some additional funds and used a little bit of our underspend because we're not spending anything on travel. Surprise, surprise. And so we've used some of that underspend to work with some freelance counsellors to offer some counselling support, because we've really noticed the importance of that, providing that emotional support to our young carers and the impact it's having on their mental health. You know, they feel more stress, they feel less connected. We know what the kind of social isolation can do to people. Young carers are often socially isolated, even more so during the pandemic. And just the latter two are kind of quite stark as well in terms of the increase in the number of hours that they're spending caring. So these are young people that aren't necessarily able to do their schooling, education and see friends and other stuff. Of course, the level of caring, the hours of caring that they're doing and taking on in terms of the average. And you can see that's quite a high stat going up in terms of the ones that are caring for longer since through the COVID-19 pandemic. So another thing that's kind of quite clear is that there's more young people that have taken on caring responsibilities during this time. Young carers have always remained very hidden. They're not very easy to identify. There's a lot of stigma that, you know, it's very hard for a parent to acknowledge how much their child is, you know, taking care of them and looking after them. And for our young people, they don't necessarily call themselves young carers because they're like, as adults will say, it's just my family, I love them, that's what I do. I don't call myself that, I'm just looking after my family. So a lot remain hidden for a number of reasons. But there are certainly new young carers coming through, so it's even more important to start to make sure we are identifying and supporting young carers in every service wherever we can meet them. But obviously, talking specifically around the trust's services, is how can we make sure we identify those, because there will be new ones, and so it's a case of continuing to ask the question. We might ask the question when you initially kind of a service user starts working with you, but we need to kind of ask that question all the way through as kind of circumstances change. You know, a young person might become a young carer, or their level of caring might take on. So it's becoming excessive, and, you know, caring far more than would be appropriate. So that was just a little bit of kind of some of the sort of issues around the context in which we're kind of working with the trust around supporting and identifying young carers. So the element about this is about the engagement and successful engagement. And I suppose our experience of where it's been most effective is where you've got all these factors in play. And we'll talk a little bit when we come to the question answer session around some of the work that we've done, where it's about us as Sheffield Young Carers, as a kind of local charity, understanding the situation from the trust perspective and from staff perspective. Because we work outside the system, it's not always easy to see in and see how it works. So actually, when we've got that engagement where we're listening and understanding from a staff and a trust perspective, as well as a service user's perspective and a carer's perspective, adult or young carer, then you got those really key elements. And I think there's some examples where we've worked together with the trust where these have come into play, and that's where it's been most effective. So, of course, it's always important to hear young carers' voices themselves. And so we've got interspersed within this some young carers' stories. They're not able to kind of come here because obviously, you know, we're encouraging them to be at school. If it was half-term week, we might have had one or two of them here. But they have recorded their stories for you to hear. So the first story here now, which is talking about what it's like to be a young carer and how it's impacted on him. So hopefully you're all going to be able to hear this. If I can get it, the stuff to work. There it is.
Hello, my name is Stephen and I am 19 years old. I first started caring for my mum when I was 11. She fell over and soon found out that she has fibromyalgia and arthritis in her spine, hip, neck and wrists. At first this didn't affect her greatly, but as time went on and I began high school, she started to struggle with day-to-day activities such as opening bottles and cans, as well as getting changed in the mornings and evenings, which meant every day before school I had to help her get dressed and ready for the day. But as the condition got worse, I had to start helping her get out of chairs and bed. When this happened, neither my mum or me got any clear information about the condition or how it would develop. We had to find this out for ourselves, which took a lot of time when I should have been focusing on school and meant we weren't sure if what we were reading was safe information. By having to be around to help my mum, I had very little time for myself to go out with my friends and do schoolwork. This meant, unlike other people my age, I didn't have a social life outside of school or college, and found it hard to talk to others my age. As well as my mum, I also care for my younger brother, who has low-functioning autism and ADHD. This means that I often have to support him deal with emotions and stress from him, but services never involved me. Whenever he's gotten a new diagnosis or services involved, they've never really asked about his home situation or given me any information about how I can support him and what to do if he's in crisis. This has made my relationship with him more difficult because I've had to try and work things out myself without getting any information to help me. I always felt good about my caring role as it has helped me build life skills like independence and responsibility, and has helped me become more mature, although maybe a bit too early. As well as affecting my social life, caring has also had a big impact on my body, causing me back pain, and has also affected my emotionally stressing and about what's going on for them, which puts me under even more pressure, especially on top of my A-level exams, which I did earlier this year, and my degree at uni, which I have just started. I did manage to get some counselling through the college, but that stopped as there wasn't enough funding available for it. I also got support through Sheffield Young Carers and Chili Pep, which has helped me get to university and become the architect I want to be in the future. But they only have limited funding and time as well. So that's my story, but I'm just one of thousands of young carers in Sheffield, and all our health and well-being gets affected because of our caring. So I'm really happy that you're hearing us today, so you can do something about this and help young carers everywhere so they don't become your service users in the future. Thank you. Hello, my name is Steve.
Oh, need to go on to the next slide. Sorry. There we go. Yeah, so obviously that was Stephen's story. As you heard, we were able to support him, and he's now just started at university this September, and he's overcome immense obstacles, and and he really wants to be an architect. And the fact he's now studying architecture at Sheffield Town University is fantastic, and it really fills you with pride. They're not our kids, but they fill us with pride. So yeah, so that was his story. I think we're going to have some questions now.
Yeah, so thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I always find it quite emotional doing sessions with you. Yeah, just hearing the stories, it's they're very touching. So obviously, yeah, we've got this week. We were lucky to have you involved with our QI event last year as well. And obviously the QI events that we have are about how we improve the quality of our provision at the Care Trust. And including the engagement with carers and young carers. So I guess my first question to you really is about what are the key principles that you value in the engagement of us as a trust with Sheffield Young Carers and the young carers themselves?
Yeah, if I stop sharing, would that be easier to see everybody? I don't know if would that be useful?
Yeah, I guess you might be able to see people then, and I think you've said, Sarah, haven't you? If people want to put their hands up throughout the discussion, that's okay, and I can feed that back to you if you can't see those. Yeah. So if anybody does want to put their cameras on at this point, then it's always nice to talk to faces as opposed to circles. Brilliant, thank you.
That's great, thank you. Yeah. So in terms of the kind of key principles, I think the very first one, which is why the QI events have always been really positive, is it's about listening to young carers. And actually, I think the trusts have always valued hearing directly from young people themselves. And obviously, that's about us being able to facilitate that and find and a space where they feel comfortable and confident to sort of speak out and be heard. So I think that's a really kind of key principle. And I think because that's the way that we've always worked, is to kind of make sure that if we're going to, where we can, we'll bring a young carer along. And if we can't, we'll bring their voice along. I think that's a kind of key principle that's been really important. But I think it's also about the trust being, it's yes, being prepared to listen, but it's not just about listening, because we can all just listen, can't we? It's about what action you then take kind of afterwards, and recognize. And so I think it's been where we've worked with a number of different sort of staff within the trust, where they've kind of listened and thought, yeah, but where can I do something in my service then, or where can I make a kind of change that will do it? And I think once we've had that kind of connection in with some key people that, you know, like yourselves and Agnes, who's the engagement coordinator, and Ailish and stuff when she was working in the engagement team, that where you've got someone you can work closely with, you get that you can have a good kind of exchange and conversation with, where you're both able to be as honest as possible, because like I said in one of the slides, we've really got to understand it from both sides. If we don't understand the constraints of the trust, we're going to keep throwing ideas out at you going, why can't you, young carers are saying they want this, they want this, they want this, and actually that you might be, if we don't know that's possible or not, it can just feel like we're bugging you, and actually that's not about a relationship, is it? Because it's got to be about that dialogue and understanding from both sides. And because the trust has kind of engaged with us as a organisation, but also been part of the broader partnerships that there are in the city, there's a carers and young carers partnership. And like within that, there's an action plan around the strategy, and we have a kind of action plan review every 6 months, where we bring young carers and carers together and professionals, where the professionals are saying, you came to us and said you want to see this happen, this is what we've done to make it happen. That kind of engagement, feedback as well around what's happened and where it's been possible or where it's not been possible. It's not about everything being a perfect world and everything can happen is in the way that we want it all to happen. But if you give that kind of feedback there, so it's kind of listening, it's taking action, and it's kind of having that feedback and keeping that communication kind of going, I think has been really valuable. I know the young carers, when they feel that when they've spoken at events and they're getting kind of a really positive response back, they feel kind of valued because of that. And I think that's really important. So those feel like the key things that and I think that works from both sides in terms of listening from both sides, being active, because it might be the certain things we need to change to make it easier, for example, for you to refer into us, or is there a kind of way within your system that if we ask this question, then that can happen? What do we need to do from our side? So it's listening, it's action, and it's feedback both ways, I think, are the key things that have made the engagement effective.
Brilliant, thanks, Sarah. And I think yeah, absolutely. You were talking about there's numerous different kind of groups and things that we're on now as organisations across Sheffield, aren't there, which feels really positive. So I guess kind of building on that, and I think you reflected it that you might have got some examples earlier on in your presentation. Do you want to just share with us maybe an example of where the trust and Sheffield with young carers? Maybe something that you could share with us there.
Yeah. So one of the things that young carers, when we first kind of engage with them in terms of with our direct work, we do some one-to-ones with them where we develop an individual action plan. We really look at the key issues that affect them. thing that comes up time and time again is information. I don't understand about my parents' condition. I can't find information. People won't speak to me. I don't understand it. And that really impacts me, because they might have a change of medication or something's happening. I get quite frightened because I don't understand it and I can't ask anybody or find out information. So that's kind of quite a kind of critical thing that comes up fairly regularly. So when we started working with kind of Agnes and started talking about the kind of need for kind of that information, but at the same time recognizing that young carers, the emotional well-being, as Stephen talked about, the impact on his emotional well-being, is kind of, and the skills that you've got around supporting emotional well-being and mental health is part of what the skills you have as a trust. So kind of we were saying that there's actually there's this need for information. There's also the skills you've got around kind of emotional well-being. So we organised last summer an emotional well-being event for young carers. So staff members from the trust, from different teams, and they came out from the trust, and you came out to meet with us at a venue that young people meet in the city centre, in a youth building in the city centre, and ran a young carers wellbeing event, where it was different teams talked about the different work that they do. They talked about the different conditions. Children could ask questions about bipolar or depression, all the different kind of support that you give. It was information that was available. They presented information that was accessible to those young people. But we also did a kind of emotional well-being, some kind of, Agnes ran some emotional well-being support and some exercises. This is how you can look after yourself, because that's a key thing that we emphasise with our young people. You have a right to look after yourself as well. You're giving out so much in terms of caring. You need your self-care as well. So it was a really nice balance of being able to provide some emotional well-being support and information. And then the feedback from the trust staff was, I really felt I learned from them. I'd never really thought about it. I was meeting, because some of them were meeting 8-year-olds that were talking to them about their parents' mental illness, and they said, I just didn't, they didn't anticipate and appreciate just quite how much the young carers do, and from quite a young age. So it felt like was a learning from both sides. There was a listening on both sides and a sharing of information on both sides. So that felt like a kind of, as a kind of bigger issue around how do we share information through to a practical solution that kind of, I think, emphasised those 3 elements. I suppose I felt that was quite a good example of where we've been able to work together well. And the intention was to run that every year, because we get new young carers coming into our service every year. But obviously this summer that's not been possible. But hopefully we'll be able to do it again next summer. And I think it's also the fact we've got access in to be able to ask you as professionals information around some of the conditions, get that information in a way that we can then present to those young people so they can understand. There's always the issue around confidentiality. We're kind of really aware of that in terms of what can be given, like as a direct information, but there's enough broader information out there that can really inform our young people so they understand the condition a bit better, and that makes them a little less frightened if they can understand it a little bit more.
Thanks, Sarah. And I was just making notes there actually, because we've got a Health and Wellbeing Month coming up next month, and I don't know if that's good, but I've just made a little note to see whether or not that's something that we can connect with again there, in terms of that work as well, and recognising, wider. Again, we're getting better with, including service users, but actually our carers and our young carers as well. So I'll perhaps pick that up with you after. I just made a note of that. So the other thing, so that's a learning of me just having this conversation. I was just having this conversation now as well, and I just wonder, you've touched on it a little bit. So I don't know if there's anything more, because my next question was going to be around kind of the learning from things. So say such as that event, anything that you've not touched on around kind of the learning. Obviously, you've said you covered quite a bit in terms of the shared across both, but anything else from there?
Yeah, some of the kind of learning that came out of that event, we had a bit of an evaluation, just thought a little bit about how we might present the information slightly differently and give more chance for the kind of cross-fertilisation of information and stuff. So we talked a bit about that in terms of the event, and obviously holding it kind of annually. But it did raise again the kind of from the staff perspective about really understanding about young carers and the need for kind of training around and understanding around how do you think young care and how can the trust kind of support it. So for kind of more work done, and we've done it jointly with the carer centre as well, because a lot of the issues that are there for young carers are there for adult carers as well, manifest in slightly different ways sometimes, but it's joint. So we now run that kind of joint training. I think there's that the next it's going to be run every 6 months. I think the next date is in November. So that's looking at the kind of the training that we can provide to sort of trust around understanding kind of young carers issues and how to identify. And so that in terms of the learning from it was that there's a need to kind of keep on talking around it, and then when there's new staff coming in all the time, you can't just like run one training course or one awareness event and everybody's going to know about it. Yeah. So it's how do we kind of reach out to the kind of the different elements, and so that training course felt like kind of one example of where we could at least start getting sharing some more of that information and awareness raising. And likewise, the stuff about learning back is that with the information we've now got from those that the teams brought along to that event, we've now got to share with other young carers that weren't at that event. So that's been really good in terms of passing on more of that information. It also led to a kind of, one of the questions that came out from one of the staff members in that event was about them trying to work out how they would identify young care. Where would they start asking the question, and how would they ask the question? Because if you're working with an adult, how do you start asking? Well, what does your child do caring? That might just shut the adult down, because there's all sorts of fear around. If I say my child looks after me or helps me, then will they think I'm not coping and I'm not a good parent, and therefore, there's all those kind of issues that are there for them. So it led to the thing about how do we kind of identify, and Agnes has done a bit of work with other sort of staff, kind of with trying to work out to develop a script and a way in which these are okay questions to ask. So she started working with staff about how would you feel comfortable asking this question. She then brought that along to our Young Carers Action Group, which is a group of young carers that kind of advocate for other young carers, and asked them, what do you think to these questions? How do they work? And those were tweaked by the young carers. And so we've coming up with a script, which is still in kind of process, by which both sides can feel comfortable. It's okay to ask me that as a young carer. It's okay as a staff member to feel comfortable to ask it. So those are kind of some of the things that are coming out of it, because we're building up that relationship, and that relationship of trust and working together is, I think, is hopefully we'll be able to get a key question that can be recorded on Insight. I know it's your big database system, kind of, IT databases take a long time to change, don't they? But there's ways.
I'll get there. Yeah. No, I think that's great, and I know you've done. Unfortunately, Agnes isn't able to join us on this call, but I know she's done some great work with you, and that again, an example of kind of really collaboratively working with the staff and with the young carers is fantastic. Before I move on to the next question, Sarah, I think would you like to share with us another clip? I'm just going to mute myself.
So this is Sara's story, where she talks a bit again about about being a young carer, but also some of it about the impact of COVID-19 on her.
We can't hear that at the moment, Sarah.
Okay, sorry. Let me unshare. Okay, let me try sharing again. So apologies about that. Let me try again. You need to hear her because she's good.
I care for my older sister.
Yeah, brilliant.
My name is Sara. I'm 17 years old, and I started caring when I was 6. I'm one of 5 children, including one little sister of age 3. I also had a younger brother who had cerebral palsy, but sadly he died 3 years ago when he was 6 years old because he got a lung infection. I care for my older sister who has chronic epilepsy, learning disabilities, and tuberous sclerosis. I have to help her in daily life in lots of ways, including helping her when she has seizures and reminding her to eat and take her medication. When my sister has seizures, it's very frightening and distressing. And during this pandemic, we've had to be especially careful, as 2 of my family members are at a huge risk from the virus. So we have been shielding despite the recent easing on lockdown regulations. We do have a carer helping our family sometimes, but because of COVID-19, the carers have lessened, and we've had to keep a distance in our own home, which is quite weird. It's also something that is quite hard to be comfortable with when anybody could have the virus. My older brother was away at university, so a lot used to fall on to me, especially looking after my younger siblings when my parents were away at medical appointments. Because of the lockdown, he has come home though one has been trying to study at home. My dad has some health problems and has also been working full-time at home during lockdown. And I've just finished lower sixth form and I'm currently in the process of applying to medical. So our house has been very busy and it can be hard to study. Before the lockdown, I could go to school and take my mind off everything. But when with my sister being at high risk with COVID-19, we've had to be especially careful about going out of the house, which has put me under mental strain. I always have in my mind that something could go wrong. It has made me on edge all the time. I've lost 8 family members in Pakistan to COVID-19, which has been really hard for all of us.
Okay, I'll stop sharing again. Well, that was just to obviously give some and kind of an indication of some of the additional pressures that are kind of there within that household.
Yeah, I find it. I know when Sara came to our event last year, didn't she? And there's just such emotional stories and just amazing what you know what our young people are doing. So right, I'm going to ask my question and let you talk. So she's obviously touched there on kind of the impact of COVID-19 on top of everything else. So my question here is, I guess, is around kind of how's the COVID-19 affected our engagement work, you know, with yourselves?
Yeah, I think it's been a mix. I think it's been, in some ways, there's been some advantages to in terms of much more meetings have happened a bit quicker because they've happened online rather than trying to get everybody in one room in at the same time, kind of thing. So I think some of the development work, particularly when we've been looking around the trying to get the question in on the kind of on insight and on the kind of initial questions you're asking. There's a whole section around dependent children and getting the wording in. So there's felt like there's been kind of sort of time to be able to really explore where that could happen. And there's been a few meetings about that have been really really productive and they've been really helpful. But it's also got to the point now where actually, in order to change it on the IT, it's not on necessarily high up the list of priorities because there's other things that are going on. That means that actually at what point we'll actually get that question in there could take a bit longer. So we've been able to kind of explore it a bit more, but there's still there's some of those barriers because obviously there's so many things happening. Not least, I mean, obviously there's the pandemic, but also all the things that the trust is doing because following the inspection as well in the Back to Good, which we've been invited to sit on the Back to Good board, which is fantastic to be able to kind of input into that. So kind of recognition that there's those kind of pressures there. So that's meant it's been so in some ways we've had some really productive meetings where you can do things online where actually people can come along for an hour and that, you know, you haven't got to travel anywhere. You've got, you know, you've got more people attending and kind of listening in and taking part, but there's still kind of, you know, things slow down because of the other pressures that are there in the system. And actually, how do we then find a way? We've spoken about this, haven't we, Joe, about how do we find a way to kind of, how can we get that up the list of priorities of what the IT department does with Insight? It's because for us it's a real priority, you know, obviously, and it's how do we kind of, how does that fit within that? So I think that's kind of one of the challenges, I'd say, is how fast we can move some of that work. I think has been difficult. And inevitably, there's so many things that the trust has to focus on. So I think we'll walk out, and we've carried on delivering the training. That's kind of gone online. It was face-to-face training before that training's gone online, and I think your new chief exec came on the training that was run in the spring, I think. So that was really positive as well, and had really good feedback from her about that. So that, you know, the chance that she would have necessarily come along to a face-to-face meeting that would, you know, training or whatever might not have happened. So I think there's been some, you know, like pros and cons in all of these things, isn't there? There are some things have kind of gone well and we've been able to adapt. Other things have kind of slightly stalled, but they're not kind of gone. They're not kind of forgotten, but they're, you know, potentially slightly stalled. Because there are just so many demands on, you know, on what we need to do, and all of us have been stretched. We have within our service about adapting to going online and how we support our young people that we're working with. So we've not necessarily had as much time as well to kind of, you know, to be able to push stuff and engage with stuff because of the pressures that have been there. within this, and like, and you get so far and then it changes again, don't you? So you're adapting again, and then you kind of working out what's safe and keeping people safe as well as possible, and that's about ensuring staff are well as well as the young people.
Absolutely. And I think it is, in terms of what you're saying, it's recognising that impact, isn't it? Because a tick box on a computer, on an IT system is kind of a systematic process, but actually the impact that's having on the young people and young carers and things is perhaps not kind of weighed up. So that's why sessions such as these are just fantastic, that kind of highlight the impact from that. Yeah. I think you've got another story that you were going to share, just to make me even more emotional. Thanks for this.
The last one, I promise.
Don't forget to share your sound, Sarah.
Yeah, hopefully I have this time. We'll see.
Hi.
Oh, no.
My name is Sara.
Sorry.
I'm 17 years old.
How do you get onto the next slide? There we go.
There we go.
This is Thomas's story.
I'm Thomas. I'm 16 and I've been a young carer since I was 8. I started off caring for my dad, who has MS and is in a wheelchair. Now I also care for my mum, who has autism, ME, fibromyalgia, and a central nervous system problem that's currently being diagnosed, and that has left her none below the thighs and virtually housebound. They both also suffer with mental health issues, and I myself have a physical disability, mental health difficulties, and autism myself. Being a carer has given me a lot of skills and made me resilient. One of the most difficult parts of being a young carer is watching them get worse, as both of their conditions have deteriorated. For my mum, I sometimes have to dress her, get her things she needs, and ferry her to hospital appointments. My parents are separated too, so I have to split time between them. For my dad, I have to do some of his shopping, check if he's okay, and go up to his house if he falls. During lockdown, the support networks we had collapsed before our eyes, with his caring calls getting cut, his prescriptions not being filled, and no one knew what to do. Mum started her diagnosis process during the end of lockdown, which also caused excess pressure. And despite living an hour's bus ride away from my dad, I still had to travel to him whenever he fell. With his alarm system not working, he spent 5 hours on the floor waiting for his carers to discover him. This keeps being a problem too. His alarm system still is not working, and this week his cleaning and shower calls have not turned up at all. Something that would have been really helpful was to have known more about my mum and dad's conditions. My doctor gave me some good information about ME, but we got nothing about fibromyalgia, so we had to work it out for ourselves. It was really scary one time because my mum's pain was so bad and we weren't expecting this, so I ended up calling an ambulance. It really freaked me out. And no one told me MS was degenerative either. Now my dad is in a wheelchair and chokes when he swallows, but no one from my health services helped me prepare for this. And recently, I ended up having to call out an ambulance because he was so tired that he couldn't get out of bed, and they had to explain to me that was his MS getting worse. This has all had an effect on me and my well-being. I've been diagnosed with depression, which might not have happened if I'd been identified as a carer earlier, and more support put in place for me and my family. My mum also got her autism diagnosis last year, and no one asked me about what I was doing for her, and if I have to ring any services on my parents' behalf, it's always a battle. I'm willing to turn up with ID, but it still feels impossible to get anyone to speak to me sometimes. Sheffield Young Carers have helped me, knowing that I'm not on my own and there's help out there. But sometimes it isn't a huge thing that young carers need. I just need someone to ask how I am, as well as asking my mum how my mum and dad are. So if I wanted to suggest some things that would help, here's a few. Please just ask whenever someone has children helping them at home. Even if it could just be an asterisk on a file so people know I'm a young carer and will talk to me and include me, that would make such a difference. But also remember, people are really, really scared that social services will come and take their kids away. My mum worries about this all the time. So asking in a way that shows that you care and that there's help available for them and their children would really help. Remember, I'm an expert as well. I can help you to help my mum and my dad because I know them better than anyone. And please tell us if there's a change or a new diagnosis so that we can get prepared. My dad got put on a new medication that wasn't working and I didn't know, and I got really scared when he couldn't get out of bed. Make sure everyone who works with your service users know there is a young carer in the family and has this logged on their system. This includes trusts, but also GPs and other health services as well. As Stephen said, we could be your service users in future. I'm currently accessing psychology through Reigate, and I'll be transitioning to your service in a couple of years. So knowing I'm a carer and how this affects me will be important when I move into your services. The trust needs to take responsibility when someone in your care has a child. I know young carers with mental health much worse than mine, so doing these things could really help them. Help them have their childhood now and maybe even save their lives in the future. Thank you for listening. I'm Thomas. I'm 16.
Just thought I'd leave that's like just because some of the things that Thomas said at the end there, those I just thought they were quite useful just to kind of list some of those there for you now.
Absolutely. And another really powerful story and really highlighting some key challenges you know that are coming across. So I guess my next question, and really it's going to be my last, that kind of hopefully will open this up then, I think, to enable people who are perhaps been listening and just kind of absorbing up to now, is kind of what are the next steps then? Obviously we've just heard there, but in terms of, from you maybe Sarah, in terms of how else that we can work together to improve how we engage with our young carers.
Yeah, I think the like some of the things that have been sort of suggested through this is that kind of key identification is saying, if there's, they know, like as Thomas said, even if you just put an asterisk on the file so you know there's a young carer, that kind of stuff around how that gets supported, knowing that there's support out there, that he can get support from us. So it's not necessarily that the trust needs to kind of provide all the support and everything that this young person needs, but understanding how they can support them to get what support they need, and that identification is crucial. So as soon as the kind of you're asked, the sooner we can be asking that question of people that are coming into the service, the easier it's going to be to identify. And it could be that some of those young people, they might not feel like they need any support, they might feel like doing okay, but actually we can then pass on the information to them to say, well, if you do need support, here's where it's available. And as there's, you know, another thing Thomas said is that just ask how I am. So, and that's, and you quite often as a trust, you're not necessarily seeing the young people. That makes it slightly different from if you're kind of at the GPs or something where you'd see the young person more readily. But if it's a case of asking the adult that your service user, you know, how's everything going? How's the family? You know, like kind of, we know that your son does, you know, helps you in sometimes, you know, how's it going for him? You know, and just kind of that kind of constant sort of reference to it and understanding. And as he says, if you've got an understanding of that and that person is trusting you, will open up and say, well, I think he needs some support now. This on, you can get the support here. We're looking at through Insight, once you can ask the question, that would then click onto a kind of very simple kind of form that you could complete that then comes direct to us, and then we can, with the permission, if you've got the permission through from the parent, we can then contact them and say and explain what our service is. So if we can have a simple route like that, they'll come through from Insight. So that's some of the next steps. How do we make it so once we get the question on, we get the identification, and then how do you link in with us so we can offer that support if that support is needed. So that feels like that's an important kind of next step, as well as the kind of ongoing with the training. And we've looked kind of on a regular basis, haven't we, about how we can get some of that in on induction. And I think that's not easy because there's not, you know, in terms of how much there is on those induction training courses, how we can get stuff in. But maybe it's just a simple slide or something that at least references and then say the next carers course is, and give a date on, and we can get that sort of that information passed around. That feels like an important next step. And obviously there's the ongoing work that the trust is doing by engaging with the citywide partnership boards that is really, really valuable. And I think it's about, because there's been we've done some good work like that emotional wellbeing day and other things, is that you know you can shout out about it a bit more than you do, and that actually it's quite good. And that's, so maybe there's some way in which we can just write up a case that we present somewhere that this is a possibility. There's always more to do. It's not saying it's perfect, as I said at the beginning, but if we can do that, then that I think would be good as well. And that's partly why I wanted to kind of take part in this as well, was because it's being positive to work with you. you know, like, and that's kind of that's been really important and really valuable to us, because there's not a lot of other health services that we have quite such a positive relationship with. We're still kind of, you know, pushing against the kind of. So I think the trust door we've come through now. We stepped through in a way, like without carry the metaphor on a little bit more. So I think that feels very positive. So I think we continue that kind of that engagement, and I think there will be stuff to build up on where we've engaged with staff and young carers and service users. That kind of, I mean, there's still the need for service users to be able to kind of meet by themselves as well as carers, but sometimes there's an inconnectivity that's valuable as well. I think that we could build on a little more.
Yeah,
I think those would be some of the next steps.
Great, and I think there's been some comments coming in. I'm not sure if you can see those in the chat, Sarah. Just you know, people quite moved, as I was, about the stories, and passing on thanks to them as well. I think some of the things, and we'll open this up now. So please, you know, if we just use the hands up function, if anyone's got any comments, questions. But some of the things that I've just sort of picked up, then, I mean, making notes that in terms of how we could improve, because obviously that's what we're wanting to do from this. Yes, hear and learn, but you know, how can we improve? The things I've sort of heard quite clearly was from the stories and from yourself was about which we're touching on now, but about learning about conditions. Actually, people, you know, these young carers are caring for people that they don't really know what the condition is they're caring for, which must be, you know, really hard. And the communication, therefore, you know, between us as an organisation and the service users, the young carers, yourself, etc., and linking to that signposting, and then just picking up on the staff induction. That is something, yes, that we'd got quite a bit of work going. Without going into too much detail, the system has changed, but it's not been forgotten about, and certainly linking it with quality improvement, service user involvement, carers, young carers. We're still trying to work out how we can kind of link all of that and still definitely, you know, raise the awareness in some shape or form with people newly joining the organisation. So Jenny has got a question. Her hands up function isn't working.
Hi. Thanks, Sarah, for that. That was very moving. Anyone who knows me knows I'll come on camera, but I daren't come on camera at the moment because listening to those stories was so emotional, and I think my mascara has just gone south. So I've just got a question that I wanted to ask of you. With the inspiring stories of the carers, the young carers, in terms of giving them something as a reward for them, and taking into account with local businesses, do you engage with local businesses whereby the young carers can perhaps get discounts for visitor attractions? I know with the current pandemic, you can't go out anywhere, but do you reach out to local businesses where they can get vouchers for themselves for things that they're into, and there's a bit of a treat for them and recognition, you know, working in partnership and engaging with local businesses?
Yeah. I think have I got an echo? I don't know. I've done.
If you just mute yourself, Jenny, just whilst Sarah responds.
Yeah, I think that thing about getting respite and getting rest. There is in the city a carers card, which has a list of discounts that are available if you're a carer, and that's for adults and young carers. So we've been working with the carer centre, manage that. We've been working with them to put on things like the name's gone out of my head. It's not called Jump. The thing where they've got all the trampolines and the trampolines. What's it called?
It is jumping. It's called jumping.
It is jumping.
Jumping air house as well, isn't there?
Yeah. So I think any of those ones. So we kind of work with those, and whenever we're doing any activities, they'll always give us a discount as a charity. But in terms of individuals, so we're getting more of those on the carers card, so young carers can have those. And some of them are just like getting some of the local nail salons for some of the sort of like young, the kind of teenage girls and stuff, saying I just like to have my nails done, or you know, there's lots of stuff that are kind of positive, and quite a few of them are offering like 20% discount, whatever, to kind of to those young people. We have a young carers activity fund, where young carers can apply for up to £300 for various activities, and that's available available through funding from the City Council. So they can apply for that. Some apply for driving lessons or drumming lessons or anything that will give them a bit of a break. So that's there as well. So it is about getting those. There's only so many businesses that are engaged with that, and the more that we can get to do that would be better. We were the Chamber of Commerce Charity of the Year a couple of years ago, and that gave us some good links in then. So I think we try to use those different avenues. So the carers card at the moment seems the best one, because that's then recognised across the that happening. And the leisure, people for leisure and what's it, international venues, Sheffield international venues, not that much of that is open with Ponsford. Ponsford is supposed to be opening, is it? I don't know if it is in Tier 3 now, but they it was the campaign by a Young Carers Action Group. We've got a group of young carers that kind of campaign around rights and issues, and they campaigned with them to get young carers on the list of people that could get the discounted card for swimming and leisure passes. And that's now across the city, that any young carer can get a leisure pass and get a discount on that. But that was a campaign that was run by young carers themselves. We tried to do that for bus passes as well, but we didn't get there. We got some free bus passes in some of the summer holidays just so they could get out and about, but we've not been able to manage that as a kind of ongoing thing. So, but those are kind of things that the young carers have campaigned on as well. So it's a good question about how do they get that break? How do they get, just to be the kids, just to do the things that ordinary kids do as well. So when we run some of our family activities, because sometimes when we speak to them, they say, I just want to do something the whole family like, or something ordinary like that families do, like, so going out to kind of Alton Towers or wherever it is. So when we do those family trips, that's always, they don't always necessarily want to be away from the person they care for. They want to do things as a family together that you would do as any family. So those are, so when we always get discounts for those, wherever we then we speak to them and say we're bringing a family with young carers along, that they'll always be very responsive. But that's on a case by case basis as opposed to across the piece. Is that
I think that's particularly challenging now, isn't it? Like you say, there's all of these things, but actually, can people go out now? And like we heard from those stories about actually not even being able to go to school for that break. I mean, school being a break, my daughter would never see school as a break, but that's where it is, isn't it? So any other comments or questions? If the hands up function isn't working, if you just want to unmute yourself and say something, perhaps.
Joe, Chris's hand is up.
Oh, is it? Oh, yeah, it's not. Sorry, thank you. It's not showing up on mine. So thank you, Gurka. Chris.
Or you were ignoring it, Joe, maybe.
One or the
other. So thank you so much. I guess a couple of observations and a question. Whenever there's weeks like this, I always home in on sessions that enable us to be grounded in the work we do, and to some extent be humbled by the work that others do. And you've done both. Excuse me. So thank you for that. And just an immediate kind of quality improvement. I'm a governor at a large grammar school, and actually, as we've been on the call, I've been looking at the tool that was produced for a guide for identifying hidden and new carers for education. And I will, from this conversation, now forward that to the head and follow it up with the lead on health and well-being. So, I'm a great believer in acting quickly and doing things fast. So my question, mindful of the amount that you already do, is we talk very much around wider systems, and within South Yorkshire, the work that I'm currently doing is bringing systems together. And I just wonder whether, do you have, are there organisations that exist like you in other areas of South Yorkshire? And if not, what opportunities are there for taking what is clearly excellent work being done here to support people in areas that might not actually have anything like what you're offering, in terms of widening some of that reach? So that's kind of a very specific question. And I guess the other question, which I'll possibly raise at the Directors Forum tomorrow, is so how is it as an organisation, as we go through sort of strategy and rethinking some of our direction, how is it that we're able to inform some of that direction and priority of things like IT with the question that you posed earlier, which on the face of it is probably no more than half an hour of somebody coding something to make it pop up. And I did a lot of service improvement work with Systems 1 over many years, and what was potentially perceived as hugely complex was actually done in 5 minutes with somebody who knew what they were doing. So conscious of the, you know, the balance of resourcing, I guess that's more of a question back into the organisation and Joe to follow up on your behalf as advocates. If there's things that we can just do that make a big difference, can we just do them? But the question around the wider system, I just wonder what your thoughts might be on that.
Yeah, I certainly know that when the IT department has been asked about, they say it's a relatively simple thing. There's just all these other lists as well. So I don't think it is a big job. It's just where it falls in the list of. I think the IT department say it wouldn't be a big job. In terms of regional reach, there are other young carers services in other parts of the city region. So some of them operate slightly differently. Some of them are just on a base, because we're an independent charity that's been in Sheffield. So we run slightly differently. Some of the others are just like a kind of a contracted service, just to deliver a kind of certain amount, so not necessarily as much as we do, but there are those services, and then we do link across those. There was recently some a bit of kind of cross-region work going on when there was some funding that came through from NHS England around their commitment in the long-term NHS England's long-term plan. There was a commitment to carers, and they actually put out a kind of something called Mind the Gap around how they can really identify vulnerable carers from vulnerable communities in as part of the kind of funding. It was only, they're offering £70,000 across the whole country, and there's going to be 7 grants of £10,000 each to do stuff across the region. So you can't do a load, but actually we work with Doncaster, and the Doncaster Carers and Young Carers Service there are going to be working around, particularly around BAME carers and access into GP local practices. So that will be a kind of, and because there's an NHS England's have got quality markers for GP practices that need to be piloted. So you kind of, combine those two together, and learning in Doncaster can then be spread across the region. But there's not many examples of that, and then there could be more. So there's other ways that we can get in on the ICE, on the accountable care partnership and the integrated care system. There's various ways across. We've tried to kind of push at some angle in around the workforce development work that's happening across the region, where when they first did their workforce strategy, they'd put volunteers and carers together, and we're going, carers are not volunteers, and carers are your biggest workforce. So actually you need to be really clear that actually, so we can have some of that kind of say in, but actually how do you affect it? So any other route in and any kind of way in would be valuable.
Okay, so just again a very direct response, and again kind of if you're happy, my counterpart, so I'm currently working on a system change of adult secure mental health provision. I have a counterpart at Children's who I'm working very closely with, who's doing a similar exercise with CAMS across the system. So if you're happy, I'll just do a quick intro to the two of you. Liz will love to hear about what you're doing, and there might just be an opportunity there for a further conversation.
Yeah. Excellent.
But thanks again. And as I said at the beginning, really humbling. If I wore some mascara, mine would have been going south too. So.
Do you leave yours off today, Chris?
Yeah.
Just at the weekends.
Thanks, Chris. That's really appreciated.
Right. We've just got a couple more minutes. I honestly couldn't see any hands up, so thank you for that, Gurka. So I don't know if anybody else has got their hands up or wants to talk just before we finish.
I just wondered, I just to follow on from Chris, it's really good to hear actually, Chris, that you're linking in the children's as well, because just hearing your the stories of the young carers, Sarah, is just so moving. And so my clinical background is I'm a speech and language therapist, and I kind of have worked with the Children's Hospital and have gone into many homes. And I remember last year, it moved me so much actually hearing the young carer on stage talking. And there was a real thought of, so in the children's services, so many therapies, nurses, health visitors, all are going into the homes, kind of working with various families. And I was just really struck, while I was working, that hadn't come to my mind to explore. Of course, you meet all the siblings, you include the siblings in your work, but actually it's such an opportunity, to ask those questions. So it's just really good to hear, Chris, that, there is going to be this link, and probably work is already happening. I don't know, Sarah, but thank you very much.
No, thank you. Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's all those range of opportunities that are there. And the big thing is, if you're starting to think it, it's not that necessarily they are there, but if you're thinking it, then you've got your eyes open to the possibility, you know, and if it's there, then that's when you can start picking up whether, and if they don't want support, it doesn't matter, you've asked, and they know what support is available if they want it. Yeah, exactly.
And I think the big thing for me that's come out of working with you, Sarah, is recognizing that link of, you know, we see ourselves, and I know we've talked about this off screen, but you know, we see ourselves as an adult an organization for adults, which, you know, we are, but actually, you know, the young carers are looking after the adults that we're looking after, and that, you know, it's such a massive link. And like you were saying, actually, you know, some of those stories were saying, if we don't look after them now and direct them to you, like you were saying, it's not that we need to look after them, we need to signpost and make sure we're identifying, you know, they're going to be, you know, unfortunately could well be our service users in the future, and obviously we don't want that. So I think it's, you know, I'm really keen that we share this recording, you know, with people out there who, with, you know, in the services, to really kind of raise the awareness of that link, because I'm not sure, you know, that we kind of recognise that, if I'm being totally honest. So I think brilliant. Yeah, we are just at time. I don't know if anybody else has got anything that they just want to say before we wrap up. But Sarah, I'd like to really thank you for your time. Please thank the three individuals as well. Oh, Zaid's just got his hand up, so before I go.
I just wanted to comment that you know, just hearing the stories, and you know, these individuals are clearly experts by experience, and the information and the lived experience that they have experience with in caring for their nearest and dearest is you know, not just humbling, but also how best we, you know, I appreciate the support networks are in place, but it's just how we can tap into that information to enable others to feel more sort of confident or assured in what they're doing, and how they go about seeking support.
Yeah, because so many of them still remain hidden, and you know, we still need to find them, because we only see a small portion really of the ones that are out there, and obviously we can't. There's only so many we can see. We're only a kind of charity, and we rely a lot on charitable funding.
Sure.
But you know, but nonetheless, the more we can work with services where they can do some of that identification support, the easier it is for us to be able to provide our support as well. And that's why a lot of work is with schools as well, because you know, and GPs, and where you can get some of those services that can provide it. And the earlier you identify, so as soon as someone's diagnosed with a chronic condition, a mental health condition, whatever, as soon as they're diagnosed, then we can be asking the question before they take on the level of care and responsibility that really impacts on their lives. So that's our more strategic, long-term, sustainable aim. Is really, we shouldn't be here. There shouldn't be young carers. You know, we should be identifying that as early as possible, and we shouldn't be doing what we're doing. But that's a longer-term aim, shall we say?
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I guess, Sarah, you've just put your email there on the chat. Thank you. So I guess if anybody else does want to get in touch with you with anything, I'm sure that I'm okay saying that you'd welcome any contact.
Yeah. Shall I put the last slide, which has just got that, if it's going to be filmed, just the last slide, which has got the website details and stuff on? Shall I put that up?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that's fine. And we can share all of that. We can put links on our website as well, to your website as well. So fantastic.
Yeah. So then that'll at least be on the recording. And is it possible to save the chat as well? And
yes, I think that should all come through to me, so I can send that through to you. Yeah, fantastic.
It's good feedback for us that we can give to our funders to say that we're having an impact, you see. So
anything we can do to support, obviously, you know, that's what it's all about, isn't it? So brilliant. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining as well. And yeah, take care. Keep up the good work.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.